I think we have, to my mind, and I think to a lot of my constituents, we've sort of lost track of what this was all about. And I have been I've been here long enough to see most of this process now roll through this House. And now, I mean, with Bill 8, we're now in the stage of, whoops, let's go back and try and fix that, because it turned out to be a bigger problem than we thought it was going to be, and we're getting beat up about it. Not to put too fine a word on that. So where did all of this start? Well, it starts with provision of electricity, provision of utilities, which is critical. I mean, we live in a place where you need to have provision of electricity. For a lot of people, it runs the fans that blow the heat around your home or around your office that is generated by the whatever kind of boiler you've got there, hot water system, whatever. Well, it's not blowing the hot water system, but and you have to have it. Now, my colleague would argue, and did, that the government should own all public utilities. And I actually differ with my caucus, because I think that's the way things should be too. I lost that argument a long time ago, but it doesn't change my mind. I believe that utilities should be public, and they should be publicly run. They're not. At the very least, what you usually end up with is government regulating utilities, because they are so critical to people, and people must have them. So the government acts as a protector, consumer protection, to make sure that it's delivered at a rate that people can afford to pay for it. We are welcoming the Leader of the Official Opposition. In 1995, the government started a process to deregulate electricity, and they allowed it essentially to be broken up into three pieces: generation, transmission, and distribution. And previous to that, pretty much every company that we had in Alberta, and they've all changed names, and I admit I've kind of lost track of them, but we had Calgary Power, who became Enbridge, so, and we had ATCO, which I think has always been pretty consistent. Yeah. We had Edmonton Power at one point, that then became EPCOR, and they spun off part of the electricity, and they are now Capital Power. So it's a bit hard to trace the names, but there you go. What we ended up with is splitting the way we get electricity into three parts. And essentially, groups didn't want to do all three. They got out of the two they didn't want to do, and they specialized in the one. And that's why, when you now look at your bill, you're now paying administration fees on three different things that you didn't used to. You had one service, it provided it to you, from the generation through to the transmission, from Wabamun to City of Edmonton, and then once inside City of Edmonton, the actual distribution to your home. And that was all done by one company, and you were billed by one company, and that's it. Now we have three companies in the game. And they're each going to charge you. They're each going to charge you an administration fee for having done what they did. And that, again, is why you look at your bill and go, holy mackerel, why am I paying more in administration fees than I am paying for the GD product? And that's why. So we can all thank this wonderful government of ours for adding those extra costs to our bill. Now, when we first started, we had cheap, relatively reliable electricity generation and transmission and distribution in this province. So it boggles the mind when we now turn around and look and go, so we've had brownouts and blackouts, we've had the cost of the electricity go through the roof because 3 generators went down at the same time, 2 of them for regular maintenance, and then a third one had a problem, and so 3 of them are offline. And now we're buying electricity from BC at absolute top dollar. And for anybody that's following along with this, there actually is a place you can go online and follow along with exactly what people are paying for the price of electricity per hour at any given time. It's fascinating to watch. Because if we're not generating the stuff locally, then we're having to buy it from somewhere else. And there was collusion at one point, which of course is one of the things we talked about when the then Minister for Lloydminster was the Minister of Energy, and you know, we raised all this. So we said it's going to be more expensive, it's going to be less reliable, and collusion is possible. Oh, no, they said. Well, guess what? It did happen. So we did end up with collusion at one point, which I think went to court and eventually got settled, where they did play around with things so that we ended up having to buy electricity at $300 per kilowatt when we should have been able to buy it at 5 cents. And you can imagine the difference between 300 and 5 cents. That's a lot. And the ratepayers, the people that actually have, get that electricity into their small business, into their farm, into their manufacturing center, into their office building, or into their home, they paid that. So we went from having reliable, cheap electricity to now not as reliable. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying the whole system's blown and we're all sitting here in the dark, because clearly we're not. But is it as reliable as it was? No. And the big boogeyman in the room at the time was, oh, if we don't move to this system, we are going to be under capacity. People will not build generators because it's not worth their while. They can't make enough money. Yeah, right. Well, we don't seem to have had a problem with that. And they're certainly making money on it. But it is not as reliable as it was. Now, when the government changed the way this whole process worked, there were certain companies that really benefited. Thank you for coming in and listening to us at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning. We appreciate it. Just a little fan club, sports fans, thanks so much. When the government did that, they changed it, and we ended up with certain companies that really did well. And this is the kind of thing where transparency in party contributions becomes really important, because on this side, I would tend to say, did any of those companies donate and really benefit from this deal? And I would say, yeah. And of course, the government side would go, they did not. They absolutely did not influence us with their ginormous donations. Well, guess what? Without transparency in the system, I can continue to say yes, but can't prove it. And they can continue to say no, but also can't prove it. And that's what's wrong with election financing. And unfortunately, the bill that we now have before us does nothing to change any of that. Specifically, and I'm sorry that was a tangent, Madam Speaker, I'll admit that, but I thought it was worthwhile.
We'd like to hear your opinion.
So we're looking at the amendment from Rimbey Rocky Mountain House Sundry. Maybe he talks so much because he's got the longest name. Do you think? Maybe? All right. So okay, wait a minute. Let me put this in context. So Bill 8, the Electric Utilities Amendment Act 2012, was amending one section. Oh, I'm sorry. I think it's actually two. Yeah, two sections in the original bill. They were long sections, I'll give you that. But two sections in the Electric Utilities Act, which is the one that we redid at the end of the 90s. Yeah. And the section with 41.1 was one of the sections that caused people a great deal of, caused the government grief, caused a number of people in the community consternation, because the government took a process out of place in which a number of other things were considered in approving large projects to go ahead. And what they did in Section 41.11 was give themselves, Cabinet, also known as the Lieutenant Governor in council the ability to do this, the power to do it. And that they would be given a particular plan, and then they would be the final arbiter, the final decision maker. And there really wasn't an obligation to consult the public. There wasn't an obligation particularly to consider public interest. And this was Bill 50. So in Bill 8, we now have the big mea culpa from the government going, bad idea. Shouldn't have done that. Let me take that one back. Let's change it. And, yeah, sorry. Whoops. Uh-oh. Let's take that out and change it to something else, because it really got them in a lot of trouble. And for rural Albertans, they were so not impressed that we now have an official opposition caucus of 17 people from a different party.
Honourable colleagues, the noise level is getting quite high in here. If we could just keep it quiet just a little bit so we can hear the speaker, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
I'm not the least bit offended if people are energized by my speaking in the House. Yeah. So thank you for that, but I can speak a lot louder than I am now, not to worry. Okay. So and that, as I said, really did not go well for the government. So we had the mea culpa bill, the Bill 8 saying, oops, uh-oh, backing off, changing this, reverse, and whatever word you want to use. Then we have this amendment coming from Rimbey Rocky Mountain House Sundry, in which he is suggesting that we not even do what the government's mea culpa is about. He's saying, strike that out and let's go and have the whole thing reviewed by a commission that would be required to meet and examine present and future public convenience and need. I'm going to agree with the need. The convenience is a bit of a strange word to put in a document like this, but I'm assuming it was done late at night and maybe we could forgive someone for that. But then he goes into a long list of things that should be considered, that benefits will accrue to Albertans. Now, remember before when I was talking about how I believe that that utilities should be public? Because the feedstock for it comes from land that we own. They're resources that all of us own, so why don't all of us get the benefit of that resource being transformed into electricity? So just one more plug for public utilities. And this would work with that because it's a benefit that would accrue to Albertans as a result of any new critical infrastructure. It also talks about whether the need of Albertans can be met by the application of non-wire solutions or less expensive but equally satisfactory upgrading of existing lines or building electrical generators closer to the load and programs to reduce the load. That's a mouthful, and he's got huge ideas in that paragraph. Because he's bringing up a lot of the arguments that we've heard over the last 15 years about, why would we try and... Electricity doesn't transmit very far. It just sort of dissipates. So it's very hard to send over long distances. And you do need to have your generators fairly close to the end receivers of it. Nonetheless, we had a number of plans before us in Alberta where we were going to build power plants near Edmonton to transmit the electricity to Calgary, to which clear-thinking people said, why wouldn't we build the plant in Calgary if that's where we needed it? But that led to a whole bunch of other arguments. They're also asking that cost be considered, and that was another one of the huge arguments that went on, is who's paying the price for this? Is it the ratepayers, or is it every single Albertan? Is it every man, woman, and child in this place that is going to pay for infrastructure that certain groups or certain people really get the huge benefit from? And did I talk about those companies that seem to have done so well under this particular scheme and are also big backers and donators to the party in government, and whether there was a close connection there? Oh, yes, I think I did. And at the same time, I said it's really too bad that we don't have stronger election financing laws, because then we'd have a clear idea of whether, in fact, there was anything wrong or right. happy to have the government be proved right occasionally, especially when it's around that kind of thing. So the member for Rimbey Rocky Mountain House Sundre is also suggesting that reasonable and economic operational alternatives that would minimize system constraints and give, this could only have come from him, give consideration to technical efficiencies, reliability, and capital costs. He then goes on to amend the second section that is amended in Bill 8, which is referring an application back to the independent system operator. This commission could then send it back to the independent system operator to be approved, to be declined, or to be changed. So it's a really comprehensive amendment, and I'm not surprised that we've spent several hours on it. It's worth considering because he really has managed to capture the arguments of about the last 10 years pretty succinctly on one page. We do get dome disease in this place. We are all in here under artificial light, and some people have been here. It's artificial light. You plug it in. It's electricity. That's what we're talking about. For many hours. And you do get kind of a funny, dome brain after a while. And you forget that really we're in here to make decisions for the people that live out there. And when I sit in those committee rooms, you notice how I always sit so I can look out the window? It's so I can look out the window and see my constituents going by, and I remember what the heck I'm doing in that committee. So that I don't forget and start to float around with all kinds of weird ideas. And we need a little reminder here, now that everybody's been sitting in here for 13 and 14 and a half hours, 15 hours. The point of this is to serve our constituents, to serve the people of Alberta, and what is the best way to do that. And I think, the member for Rimbey Rocky Mountain House, Sundre, is very thoughtful, and I'm sure spent a lot of time on this. He's actually been thinking about this for probably 10 years. But he has managed to encapsulate most of the problems that were identified. Would this bring us back to the point where we had safe, reliable, cheap production, transmission, and distribution of electricity? Probably not, but I think those days are done, frankly. I think that last bird got killed. It's over. That dog don't hunt no more. And we're not going back there. So what are we going to do with what we've got in front of us? And I actually think this is I know the government's not giving this serious consideration because they're all looking really, really cranky over there. But you should have. You should have. There it is, big smile. Thank you so much from, hang on, Lougheed, Calgary Lougheed. But you should, because this issue has been a particularly bad one for this government, and you haven't come through it very well. And people are still, the mud is still sticking to you on this one. And you all have beautiful suits, and the mud just doesn't go with the suit, right? You have got to figure out more positive ways to work your way out of this one. And what you gave us with Bill 8 is not strong enough. It is not addressing the very high cost that people are paying. It's not addressing the reliability. We had absolutely reliable delivery of power, and ever since the government did this, we get brownouts, we get blackouts, we get points where too many generators come offline and we're paying $300 a kilowatt hour. I mean, come on. You should have been able to do a better job than that, and you didn't. So Bill 8 is not going to dig you out of the hole that you're in. It's not going to take the mud off your lapels, and it's not going to make Albertans think any more kindly about you around electricity. I think you should have tried harder and gone further on that one. And I do agree, and I'm willing to support this amendment from Rimbey Rocky Mountain House Sundre for having made an attempt to try and capture some of the most egregious omissions and commissions that were made with Bill 50, 36, and 19. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to that. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing from the other side.